Hi, my name's Jo. I'm one of the midwives for Leeds Teaching Hospital Trust. I'm going to try and explain to you how you can tell that you're in labour or how you might know when you're in labour. So the real thing that is labour is contractions. Contractions make your uterus push down on your baby and pull up on the cervix or the neck of the womb. So they usually begin quite gradually and develop over time. It's normal in pregnancy to get practice contractions. We call these Braxton Hicks. They don't actually get you any closer to having your baby, unfortunately, but they're a sign that the uterus is just getting ready. Braxton Hicks tend to be mild and just erratic and irregular. So you might have 1 or 2 in an hour, then nothing, and then the next hour have 3 or 4, and then nothing more till the next day. And they tend to stay fairly steady and even, so each one might last 15-20 seconds. Labour contractions begin by being fairly short and mild, but they actually get longer and stronger and more intense over time, and that is how you can tell the difference. So Braxton Hicks begin anywhere in the uterus, and they're just kind of chaotic tightenings that don't make a difference to the cervix. Contractions always do begin at the top and push the baby down. So labour contractions do grow over time. They sometimes change quite quickly, especially if it's not your first baby. The contractions might just be felt in your back for most of the labour. This is dependent on the position your baby's lying in. So sometimes you can be fooled in thinking it's not labour at all when you've just got a bit of backache, but pay attention because it might be. For most women, by the time they're having contractions that are lasting a full minute, and they've probably got about 3 minutes between those contractions, they're in the active phase of labour. To get to that point can take any amount of time. And what's really important to remember is, as long as you're okay and your baby's okay, it doesn't matter how long that is. It's quite crucial, though, to keep doing the things that you would normally do. So eat, drink, and rest, and just see what happens. So sometimes contractions are the first thing you're aware of. For other mums, you might notice a mucusy show. So you've got kind of a jelly-like plug that sits in the cervix or the neck of the womb, and that can get dislodged. That can happen quite early on, so it might be quite a while before you actually go into labour itself, but it's kind of like an indication that there might be things going on. The cervix is usually tightly closed before labour starts, and the mucus is kind of just an extra protection for you and your baby. The mucus itself is a thick, viscous stuff. It can be completely clear, it can be pink, it can be brown, and sometimes it's streaked with blood. This can be normal, but what I would say is please do contact a midwife if you see any fresh red blood loss during your pregnancy, just so that she can be sure it's a normal thing that you're observing. And if she's in any doubt, she'll ask you to come down and be checked over. Another sign of labour is your baby sits inside a bag of membranes with around about 1 litre of fluid inside you. Your baby practices breathing and swallowing this fluid, and it's all sterile. The liquid itself is as runny as tap water. It's usually completely clear, but it can be a little bit pink, it can be brown, it can be green. The bag of membranes will burst at some point. The most natural time for this to happen is when you've probably already been having contractions for maybe a number of hours, but it could be the very, very first thing that you see. So you might just find you wake up and there's some wetness. You might actually experience a bit of a popping sensation and then start to trickle some fluid. Once the bag of waters is broken, the liquid keeps on coming out, but it can be a little stop and start. You can have a hole high up, so you get a little gush. It might tail off for a while, and then you get a bit more. So if you see fluid that has a colour to it, you'll know it's your waters. If there's no fluid there and you're not sure, put a pad on. If it's runny liquid that's coming away, it will be your waters. When your waters break, we ask you again to contact a midwife. This could be your home community midwife, or it could be the midwife at the hospital. The waters around your baby act as a bit of a barrier against infection. So once they're broken, we need to make a plan with you as to what to do next. For most mums, that plan is to give some time, because labour does usually follow on once the waters are broken. But there does need to be a conversation, and you need to know what your options are, so please always do remember to contact your midwife. For most mums, you're fine to stay at home in early labour. Things to be mindful of is if you do see any fresh red blood loss, you need to contact your midwife. If your waters are broken, then again you need to speak to your midwife. Also be aware of your baby's movements. Your baby should still have frequent movements. They don't really stay still for that long. So if you find your baby's quiet, do the things that would normally make you notice your baby's movements. And if you still think this isn't quite as usual, please do get in touch with the Maternity Assessment Centre. They will bring you down, monitor your baby and check things out. Another thing to be mindful of is if you have signs of labour before 37 weeks, so before what we call term. It's much better if you're going into labour early to come to the hospital. Sometimes we can take steps to stop that labour. Sometimes we can take steps to help your baby deal with newborn life when it's born. So always do get in touch with us. It's really, really useful towards the end of your pregnancy to start thinking about labour and be prepared. It can go any old way. Nobody really knows what kind of time of day you're going to start in labour, who's going to be around with you, what help you'll have. So having a plan is definitely really, really good. Initially at home, I would let somebody know, but maybe not everybody. You don't want millions of text messages and phone calls. You want to stay calm, as relaxed as possible, and be positive if you can be. So a supportive partner is really, really useful. The next thing to think about is maybe the environment. So kind of quite early on, you can probably just put the telly on, potter about, make sure you've got your last bits and pieces in your bag. And not be too stressed. And I really wouldn't begin to time things from an early phase. There's all kinds of mobile phone apps these days that would let you assess where you're up to in your labour, but I don't think they're worth it. They make you more aware of each contraction, and the more you think about it, the more pain you're likely to feel. So just be chilled, and just let it happen. It may be that you're the lucky one, and your labour begins, and over not very much time, your contractions get longer and stronger and more intense, and the labour properly develops. But it could be that you have a whole wakeful night, or maybe even a couple of wakeful nights with contractions on and off. Both things are normal. What is important to remember that you're okay and your baby's okay, so do keep eating, drinking, nip it to the toilet, rest when you can, just in case it's quite a long situation for you. You're fine when you're pregnant to take 2 paracetamol every 4 to 6 hours, the same way you do when you're not pregnant, if you're normally all right with them. So that's not a bad thing to do in the early phase. Getting it in and out the bath is definitely helpful. So maybe some paracetamol, a little soak in the bath, and then have a lie down if you're tired. You get to a point in labour where you feel worse if you try and keep still as your contractions get that bit longer. Okay, so you might find you're in your labour, that when the contractions come, you start to get a little bit tense. This is quite normal, and a lot of mums either begin to hold their breath or breathe in a fast, shallow way, sort of hyperventilate. Both of those things are not good. They're not good for you, and they're not good for your baby. Consciously thinking about your breathing can be really, really useful. So the quickest way I know to explain this to you is if you can imagine you've got a candle flame in front of you, and that is the last bit of light, and you must not blow that flame out. So what you're going to do is do a steady, soft, even out breath. So just like this. So I know it does look a bit mad, but hopefully you'll remember, if you keep your breath steady and even, work your way through the contractions if they're making you tense with that steady, even breathing. When the contraction's gone, you'll be comfortable again. You won't normally have any pain, so that you can be relaxed and move around and you'll be okay. But for just that individual contraction, each one as it comes, you might find it helpful to breathe. I think it's a really, really good trick for birth partners too, because labour can be intense for you as you're giving support. So if it's all getting a little bit much, you're wondering what to do next, just breathe together for a contraction or two, and then it's a bit grounding. You can think about what to do next. That might be ringing your midwife, that might be changing position. When you're moving around, if you start to find you're in more pain again, it may well be because your baby has moved. So just get up and try something else. Standing and leaning on a worktop, leaning over the back of your easy chair or your couch, kneeling on the floor and leaning over the arm of an armchair. Any of these things can be really, really helpful. putting a bit of music on and rocking and swaying. All of that helps your natural endorphins, your body's natural painkillers to build, and hopefully they will match you and they will keep increasing through the course of your labour, so you can be really surprised by how well you do. So at no point panic. If you're feeling stressed at home, please ring the hospital or speak to your midwife at any time at all. The calmer you are, the better things will be. Your midwife and the midwives at the hospital are there all the time, anytime. So if you've got anything you're not sure about, you're not certain things are going well, you can always ring and ask. You will find that the labour gets off to a much better start if you do stay at home for that early phase.